So this is going to be a fast-moving panel. I realized this morning that really probably should have been a 45-minute panel. We had 30 minutes in the schedule, and we are now 22 minutes away from our scheduled reception. So, so I will try to move quickly, and we might have to we'll try to get some Q&A from the audience, but we might also take some of your questions during the reception as well, over drinks. Nothing wrong with that, right? So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, is what I'm just saying here. I'll say a few words about what motivated this panel, and then dive into, there was a congressional hearing that was part of the motivation for this. Is it? Oh, yes. We should keep moving. Thank you. There's our photos. Important. And I want to keep moving here. I'll talk a little bit about the history of learning and employment records, and then we'll also we'll allow each of the panelists to present some of their perspectives on LERs and federal policy more broadly. We heard a lot from Nick Moore about talent marketplaces and kind of what the Department of Education has been doing over the past year and a half as a new administration. We've had the new administration. Talked a lot about workforce Pell, and this will be a more abbreviated discussion of everything else. So without any further ado, I'll answer the question of why are we having a panel on LERs in the first place, given that there has been so much discussion, given all of the discussion right now, how it does feel like workforce Pell sometimes sucks all the air out of the room, given how much we've been thinking about it. So again, there was a congressional hearing that got some attention on December 10th, 2025, this last December. It was led by Burgess Owens, a Republican of Utah, titled "Building a Talent Marketplace: How LERs Empower Workers and Expand Opportunity." One of the witnesses on this hearing was Alex Kaplan, who we were going to have on the panel. He dropped out at the last minute. Annelies came forward and took at the last minute. We really appreciate you stepping in to fill in for Alex. He had a personal conflict. But we will show a little video clip from the hearing to give you an idea of what was really motivating these members of Congress to have this congressional hearing, and how I think it was sort of, in some ways, accumulation of a lot of interest that's grown over recent years around LERs and how we can really recoup some of the investment that the federal government and state governments and philanthropic organizations have made in learning and employment records. So LERs, they've been around for a while. So I'll be honest, this was me co-working with AI. I did create a little timeline, an interactive timeline of the learning and employment record movement. If you want to follow along on your phone, it's interactive. They say that you can just build things now. So if you want to take a look at what Claude and I came up with as kind of the eras of the learning and employment record movement, you can feel free to do so. It's interactive. You can also use that. If you already had the Claude app on your phone, I found that it might work better to use that tinyurl.com/LER-NCRN. Basically, what we came up with was that there were several eras of LERs. They really came out of this e-portfolio movement that started in the late 80s and early 90s, when the internet was new. People were thinking about how can we showcase student achievements. E-portfolios were sometimes fondly called digital boxes of stuff. They were basically, students could put their assignments that they thought they did well on, or other evidences of learning, outstanding student work could be put in electronic portfolio, for example. They were this idea of kind of a digital storage box for students' evidence of learning and credentials. I remember at the University of Washington when I was an undergraduate there from 2004 to 2009, you could have a portfolio with sample writing. You could put your writing samples and recommendations from faculty members into an online portfolio, and our advising office thought that was really cutting edge. Then around 2010, we had the Open Badges movement, supported the Mozilla and MacArthur Foundation, which led to a period of real technological progress, but slow adoption still in the United States. And in other countries, the European Union has made similar progress over time with their Europass program. The real acceleration of LERs, I think, has happened in the last 10 years, which is really within the lifetime of the NCRN. NCRN, we were founded in 2018, and This real acceleration has led to a lot of investments, a lot of prototypes, but yet still slow adoption. So I'll go ahead and share a few clips from this congressional hearing. This was Burgess Owens, a Republican of Utah, and he was the organizer of the hearing. This will be a clip. We're going to play it at we decided to play it at about 1.35 at speed. So to move quickly, and but hopefully you get a gist of what they were talking about.
I will recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Ms. Pulsifer, WGU has been at the forefront of LERs, and I want to thank you, by the way, for your participation
we did
in the
not want that.
Trump's term to kind of get this process started.
Oh, there we go. We're good.
Why
No, we're good.
WGU felt the need to lead on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for that question. I think it's pretty simple. That WGU believes that education has to be a pathway to opportunity, and so one of the core elements of that is ensuring that the individuals that have now acquired a credential and all the competencies and skills associated with that can appropriately communicate that into the world of work, because one of the key challenges is that every individual through that education wants to ensure that they're ready with the knowledge, skill, and ability necessary for the job. In providing now individuals, the graduates and students at WGU, with that digital transcript that has the verified skills in it, the employers now, or the workforce now, in fact, have a very clear articulation of what our graduates are ready to do. So it better aligns with the skills, the tasks, activities that exist in roles, and so that those employers can actually ensure that our graduates are skilled and credible. The other key thing is that it does increase the ability for those individuals to personally navigate the career options that they have in a geolocated way, meaning that specifically with our Achievement Wallet, our LER, it now surfaces to them the roles at which employers in their specific location that they already have the skills that would ready for them for those jobs, and it even automates the way and mechanisms by which they can apply for those jobs and surface their transcripts, these LERs, to those employers.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. DiDonato, what are the more important lessons learned from the early pilots that we should understand?
Thank you for the question. I would say there's several lessons that we've learned through this implementation in Alabama, as well as some other pilots that we've been a part of. Number one, messaging. Talent marketplaces can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we need to really make sure that we have very specific messaging, clear messaging, easy to understand messaging for each of the user personas, whether it's students, whether it's veterans, education training providers, employers, et cetera, about what this means to them and how this is supported. Two, partnerships are extremely important. There's a lot of really good work happening at each level, but in siloed work. And so we need to make sure that talent marketplaces and LERs are an amplification of what's happening as opposed to it being a threatening existence to them. So partnerships are extremely important all the way across the board. Without them, obviously this work does not exist. Legislation and funding. Time is of essence to a lot of folks. The folks who are invested in this, whether it's employers, whether it's education, training providers, whether it's students, whether it's job seekers, need to know that this is going to be a persistent opportunity for them to invest their time that's needed. So funding, legislation, the signal that they know that this opportunity will last for the long haul is important. It's an evolving conversation, so we need to make sure that the technologies we're utilizing, what we're investing in, also we're evolving and consistently moving at a rapid speed and have those capabilities. And then lastly, we need big data. We need a lot of information to make this work. We need a lot of information to make sure we're understanding the cross-sectoral partnerships and opportunities that are out there. I would say those are all key lessons that we've learned throughout this process.
Thank you. Mr. Kaplan, you and other witnesses have highlighted that LERs are a tool that fits within the broader framework of a talent marketplace. How could this kind of tool facilitate better coordination across different systems that we may not be considering?
Thank you for that question. The thing about learning and employment records is that they represent a common set of data and a common set of protocols around the skills and competency that individuals have accumulated over the course of their lifetime. If we can settle on this common set of standards, which we're well on our way to doing, we'll be able to enable people to transfer that information about themselves to employers, to academic institutions, and for those employers and institutions and others to see that that verifiable data is accurate and correct, enabling them to do things like offer a job to somebody, admit them to their university. So there are a lot of opportunities here where by bringing LERs to the forefront and establishing them as a common set of data, we'll be able to use them in order to support and make easier the navigation of the talent marketplace.
Thank you.
We understand.
A Democratic member of Congress, Bobby Scott from Virginia.
Now I'd like to recognize my friend from Virginia, Ranking Member Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all agree that skills are important, and we're not talking about just digitizing a resume. Maybe we can do that today, but creating a record that lists specific skills that can be recognized nationally. Now, that offers many questions. Mr. Cheney, because you're looking at what the process is for validating a particular credential, who gets to make the verification, how you evaluate credentials, who gets to regulate all this. And there are a lot of ways to evaluate credentials. I mean, you can get we have the registered apprenticeship program now, run by the Department of Labor. Program is recognized. If you're a graduate of a registered apprenticeship program, it's a high quality because it got registered and it's nationally recognized. Now, you can get that through, I guess, you can get a credential by graduating from a recognized institution or a skills certificate from a recognized institution. You can take a test. You can be licensed by a government agency or evaluated by some credentialed reviewer. We've heard employers writing stuff into the LER, but I'm a little concerned that they may not be qualified to evaluate, particularly when you toss in subjective requirements. What kind of process would there be to get this national recognition so that everybody knows what you have on your resume?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we're talking about a national recognition. We're talking about a national system that allows information in an LER to be openly and securely shared across different users of that system. So it could be that an individual can share the information in their LER with a next educator, with a next employer, or whoever else they choose to. So it's not a national recognition, it's a national
Well, there's not a national recognition. This isn't much more than just digitizing your resume.
Well, I'm trying to be careful in using recognition because I don't want that to be conveyed back to Representative Grothman's question about, is this governmentally approved kind of situation. But we do need a national system where we have the ability to know that information is being shared securely about the validated skills that you have.
Well, Mr. Kaplan, we have this thing going, we have this kind of programs in Utah and Alabama. Do they recognize each other's work?
I can't speak specifically to Utah and Alabama, but I would say that from what I know, it's a challenge to move a credential issued in one state and have it be identical to a credential issued in another state.
Well, if you don't have a system that does that, what are we talking about?
Well, that's what we're encouraging to be created here. Is that
Something akin to the registered apprenticeship program where the Department of Labor would be in control and would set the standards?
we're talking about a decentralized distributed infrastructure that would allow people to move information within the LER about their skills and competencies anywhere they go. Think of it more like ATMs or credit cards. So what we're talking about here is that you have all these different issuers of, let's say, credit cards, call that an LER, and all these different recipients of credit cards, say LERs, and we want to make it really simple for all that movement to occur.
Well, if you don't know what somebody's credential is, I'm not sure how valuable it would be. We've heard, I think the gentleman from Missouri mentioned a lot of employers are less interested in specific skills and more interested in soft skills like showing up on time, following directions, critical thinking, working with others. How does all this convey those kinds of skills?
Well, I think, again, we want to be able to allow people themselves to assert that they have skills in those kinds of areas. When you're talking about the soft skills areas, in fact, there are a lot of organizations that provide recognition for having those soft skills. When I worked at IBM, we got recognition for things that we did collaboratively or collectively that we were good at selling. So as an example, I have a certificate in selling.
Okay.
And so that's sort of a soft skill, right?
Congressman, if I may, Congressman, on this point, I think there's a key consideration here, which is I think I understand where you're going with the registered nature of things. The degrees out of institutions are registered and they're valid, if you will, but not all of those have credibility and readiness actually attached to them in the marketplace. So I think it's a combination of both the effects of ensuring that there are those that can verify and validate competencies or skills they're awarded, but you also have to have the market's influence there because not all of those credentials are actually valued or credible in the marketplace. They're not relevant to the jobs that are needed. And so I think the notion of a digital learning record and skill record here is to effectively signal that says, for the job that you require, the skills and competencies necessary in that, I can signal to you that I have had those verified. They're not self-declared. They've actually been verified by the institution where I demonstrated that competency or I certified it. So then it becomes credible in the marketplace in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
All right, so we have a Slido that people can take in the background while I go ahead and introduce our panelists and give our panelists a chance to react to that spirited debate that occurred before Congress about 4 or 5 months ago. So Amanda Bruno is joining us from Lewis-Burke Associates. She advises clients on federal activities that impact education, immigration, economic development, and workforce policy. She has a broad portfolio. In the interest of time, I'll just really highlight that she, before joining Lewis-Burke, she also worked in government affairs at Ohio State University and is a graduate of Miami University and holds a master's in public policy from George Mason. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Annelies Goger. Dr. Goger has been involved in the NCRN for many years. We really appreciate her engagement over the years. She's Director of Research now for UpSkill America, an initiative of Aspen Institute's Economic Opportunities Program. Before joining Aspen earlier this year, she was a Rubenstein Fellow at Brookings, where she collaborated with state leaders to scale apprenticeship programs, implement skills-based hiring, and transform labor and education data systems. She also has done a lot of work on digital credentials and LERs in her role at Brookings, and has a PhD in economic geography and was a Fulbright Scholar in Sri Lanka. It's amazing. A couple of years ago, we tried to do a census of all the different disciplines represented by all the different researchers in the NCRN. I think that you are one of maybe 2 geographers actually in the community. So I would love all the perspectives we bring together here. So Amanda, I thought I would ask you first to share some of your perspectives on what you've seen in your work at Lewis-Burke and kind of how you've been talking to your clients and different organizations you interact with about learning and employment records. Where do you see federal policy going in this space? Where do you see it going? What do you see as the major opportunities and challenges at this time?
Sure, and I will talk fast because I know what I'm standing in between, and I am not going to be what makes us late for the reception. But I have seen bipartisan interest in workforce development policy broadly, and as you saw a little bit in those clips from the hearing, in learning and employment records. I think, especially in the time we're at right now, this is incredible that we have members of Congress agreeing on anything, and it's great to see the opportunity for learning and employment records here. Like Assistant Secretary Moore said earlier, there is some legislation in Congress right now, including Congressman Owen's Match Act, that directly would authorize the creation of state talent marketplaces, as well as learning and employment records. And Chairman of the House and Education Workforce Committee, Tim Walberg, also includes a codification of the definition of learning and employment records in his current WIOA reauthorization bill. So those are certainly some of the opportunities. I think some of the challenges that I've seen are, first of all, again, going back to what Assistant Secretary Moore was talking about, the danger of the status quo. There is so much going on in Congress that is going to take precedence between now and the midterms over workforce development, unfortunately. And so what actual concrete movement we see is going to be a challenge. And then I also think, and this was also demonstrated by the clips we saw, is that members of Congress from both parties are interested in LERs, they're interested in talent marketplaces, and they think that they can help solve this question of how do we get people good jobs and how do we get employers good employees. However, they don't fully understand LERs or talent marketplaces. They want to create programs that will help states set them up, but they don't fully understand what that looks like. And so I think that's one of the bigger challenges, and I also think that's something that our network here can really help inform Congress on.
Thank you. And Annelies, same question to you. What are you thinking about, both from your perspective previously with Brookings and today with Aspen Institute? What do you see as the main opportunities and challenges? What do you see going on in this space?
Yeah, I agree with Amanda that one of the biggest barriers has been understanding and what is an LER. And actually, even among people working on this directly, they don't have, if you asked each person, you would get a different definition. And so I'm wondering if, as a field, we're starting to shift away from using that term, because maybe what we're talking about is different pieces, right, of an ecosystem that we need to build out. And so specifically what I think about is, and especially from a federal point of view, you know, we really, with distributed data systems, it really introduces a different landscape through which like data flows, and we need to rethink in some ways who owns what data, what's public good, what's proprietary, and how do we establish ecosystems where data cannot be trapped in silos, but also where linked data can protect people from things like whole silos getting hacked and people's data getting free, or, you know, cyber issues. So what is the new architecture that we need to build around rights, ownership, security, safety that is undergirding all of the data flows? Because with cloud-based infrastructure and other technologies, quantum computing, cyber issues, AI, the landscape is changing really fast, and the current situation is a very siloed data, and you have a lot of proprietary vendors trying to create universes that are separate. It's not really, it doesn't have the fundamentals to create that flow and to ensure that individuals can have agency in what happens with their own data. And then secondly, I think I was impressed from my first viewing of this in December that the idea of interoperable data itself is really gaining currency on the Hill. Like, big win there. Like, they know at least they know what that means, right? Great. And it's showing up in different conversations, right? And I think that's a really critical piece for building anything. Another really critical foundation that I would love to see more attention to has to do with how do we identify, if we're trying to build something that's tied to an individual, then we have to find a way to do that effectively and without fraud, right? So when I get a record from a badge, it's tied to me and not somebody else. And when I go and get a job, that employment record is tied to me. And when I do other things, that gets tied to me in other institutions. So that individual identity link is important. And how do we establish something that that can be used to link records on the back end, but that also has certain sort of legal protections for people and other things around how that identity can be used and so on. And so I think moving forward, the issue that came up in this video that I find very important for future work is validating skills and what is the architecture that we need to build for if I'm at an employer. I actually disagree. I think it was Alex Kaplan that said that like an employer can just say, yeah, you did that thing. I don't think that's enough. And I think that we need to have some way of having multiple employers in that sector, have an assessment framework to say, once you've gone through this module of this course, we're going to give you an exam and you need to pass it to move, to get that badge or whatever it is. There's not really that architecture built for workplace skills. So how do you validate skills, especially in the workplace?
And I think we're seeing that also on the Slido too. A number of the comments have also mentioned this idea of, it's great to validate credentials, but can we say something about the skills that underlie that? And I mean, certainly, I want to think about my research group, the work that we do, and where we've seen that if you were to synthesize, I think, how the NCRN, our research agendas have changed over the past 8 years, since going back to 2018, so we were founded in 2018, 2019. Definitely, we have the ability to say a lot more about skills and what skills are embedded in the credentials that individuals hold. And there's a lot of interest right now, I think, in figuring out how do we make that transition from thinking about not just, we talk about skills-based hiring, but can we talk about skills data? Can we think about how can we use skills data more effectively? And the LER, I think, it seemed like the members of Congress, if you were to watch the whole hearing, which I, recommended, it's a congressional hearing. It's, but I think it's still worth watching. It's something that I think is, you do see this coming up again and again. This was kind of, I'm not going to force you all to answer this one. This was actually a trick question because we actually don't know. We're not going to waste your time on this one. But, I thought it was going to be, in my mind, I thought it would be, oh my gosh, everybody would be shocked. We don't have the research. But it's true that we actually don't know. I don't know if either of you want to guess what adoption really is out there, but it's probably pretty low, right?
I mean, it depends on how you define adoption.
Yes.
So
that's right.
When we did visits to states, I mean, the thing that struck me was every state seems to be kind of working toward, they can see the writing on the wall. They're going to have to show what is the outcome of what I'm doing in these various ways. But how they're doing it and who's leading it and what the motivations are and like where it's coming from, completely different in every state. Some states are really building out the non-degree credential quality frameworks, and other states are coming at it more from a apprenticeship work-based learning. Others are starting with employers and trying to get them to adopt some kind of wallet. It's all coming from different angles, but there does seem to be convergence that the status quo needs to shift, and people are going to, whether it's workforce Pell, whether it's work verification for Medicare, like people are going to have to show what happens to this person after this program. And so hopefully the interoperable piece doesn't get lost, because otherwise you're going to have 53 different ways of doing that, and that's not much different than what we have now.
And I think I saw a question on the Slido about, and it might have been slightly sarcastic, but doesn't the white collar already have this on LinkedIn? And that's actually something we've talked about at my job, is if we're going to start thinking about LERs and we're going to design them from the ground up on a national scale, who are we designing it for and what needs are we meeting? And I think that's a really important question to think about, because ideally we'd love to design a system that works really well for everyone, but that might not be possible, especially at the start, especially when we have members of Congress legislating who don't fully understand it themselves. So I think that's a really important question, and some of these data points that we've been talking about all day and how states are using data systems is a really important starting point for building that platform in the future.
Mm-hmm. So I will go ahead and ask both of you, and people can also chime in on Slido if you want to share with the broader room. Where are we going with this? In 5 years, will we solve this adoption problem? Will we maybe not solve it, but where are we going? Are we going to see continued investment? Are we going to see, is this congressional hearing a harbinger of further federal funding and further federal involvement? Or is it a high water mark? Is it something, or neither? I see, trying to read your faces. Trying to read the faces in the room. Amanda, do you have any perspectives on that?
I certainly hope it's not the high water mark. I think we're going to have continued interest. I do think something that's important to keep in mind is that all the bills I've talked about and the ones that other panelists have mentioned today, they're all authorization bills, which means that even if Congress enacts them into law, funding is not guaranteed. So where we are in 5 years really depends on how much we actually invest in the development of these programs and how much states really take it in stride in implementation. But I do hope that we see forward movement. I think that the questions driving congressional and federal interest broadly are genuine, and especially around how do we get our citizens into jobs that are helpful for them and that help them support their families and find fulfillment. And so I hope that we will see progress in the next 5 years, but I'm not going to promise that we've got full adoption. I've worked with Congress too long.
I guess what I would say is in 5 years, is there going to be mass displacement from AI? If so, what are our UI systems going to be doing? Because that's going to drive any major shift in how LMI enters this space. And so if Google and Anthropic see the writing on that wall, would they fund, some state capacity, some national standards of some kind, something, are we going to build ways to project where layoffs might happen, where AI might be impacting things more severely, so that we can be more proactive about preventing layoffs, about minimizing harm, all of that? I don't know. But if that starts to happen, you're going to hear about data real quick because we don't have it. And so every time I talk to the Googles and the Anthropics, I'm always like state data systems, we need to move them forward. And so I think it's going to be about what is happening and what is the political will to shift it. I do think since COVID, it has actually gotten things moving in this space. And so I do find it promising that people know the word interoperable in Congress, and hope that they continue to see how having better data in a more timely and standardized way can actually equip not just them to make better decisions, but everybody, a learner, to know what to study for, or what career decision to make, or an employer to figure out where to locate because the skills are here and not there. We can do all kinds of stuff with data if we had data. But is it going to be about LERs? Probably not. Is it going to be about data and who owns it and where does it go, and is it proprietary? Is it not? That, sure. Yeah.
So I think we should probably move into the reception because we did have a registration fee this year. You all have paid for it. But let's continue the conversation in the other room. I think you can actually take your snacks and drinks back into this room, or spread out, I think, would be fine. So thank you so much, Annelies and Amanda. Really appreciate it.